Okay. So this is the what? Oh, I actually I actually went back into the channel to configure things like that to configure the the home page for the channel, I suppose, to put playlists up and things like that. And I checked ep- the listings of the after show, and apparently the after show is actually like 3 episodes behind how many shows there actually are, how many live streams. Um, so instead to fix that, I just put like a bunch of like 22.5 to 22.20.25 after show number 22.25, things like that, instead of going back to every following one to change the number. So I guess that's how it's done. But other than that, I will continue reading this book. Um, it's quite nice. I do enjoy this book. I think it's quite nice, and um, I'm thinking of actually I am thinking of leaving a review for this book. Actually, um, yeah, I'm changing the mic settings to make my voice a little louder. But yeah, I'll just go ahead and read the book. This is, I think, as far as I remember getting was on this section. So after this section, we'll be reading brand new things. Um, so I will go ahead and do that. By 1839, Victoria was faced with yet another problem, the question of her future marriage. The heir to the throne was her unpopular uncle, the Duke of Cumberland, who, because women were barred by Hanoverian law from the throne, had succeeded his brother William IV as King of Hanover. Hmm. And thus broken the link between the two countries, which dated from the ascension, uh, accession, which dated from the accession of George I. Not only was her uncle unpopular, but his son was blind. There were therefore very sound reasons why, unless Britain and Hanover were to be reunited under a king unacceptable to the British people, Victoria should marry and produce an heir. The question was bound to arise in her many conversations with Melbourne, and in July the Queen told him that the whole subject was odious to her, and that if possible she would prefer to never marry at all, a pronouncement which he greeted with some doubt. I want to look up that word. I want to. I have a feeling I know what that word is, but I obviously don't know what the dictionary or Google has to say about it. That's what I'd do back in the day, was look things up in a dictionary. Those were different times. extremely unpleasant or repulsive. Latin, with odium means hatred in Latin. So it's a Latin word. There's also, let me look something else up. There's also, no, I think those are different. There's, I'm thinking of, um, I'm thinking of the cow from back in the barnyard. Ah, it's Otis. I pronounce it Otis, but I guess it's Otis with a T. Let's see. He did, he did, however, assure her that, though he had expected some public anxiety on the matter, there appeared to be none. He was able, therefore, to agree with her to the extent that, until some impatience was shown, there was no need to make any decision at the moment. Victoria could certainly afford to wait a year or two. Her reluctance may appear somewhat surprising, since the visit to since the visit of her Colbert cousins, Albert and Ernest, in 1836, Victoria had apparently accepted the fact that her uncle Leopold was planning a marriage between her and the younger of the two cousins, Albert. And she had certainly shown no aversion to the project then. After their visit, she had written to her uncle to thank him for the prospect of great happiness, which she foresaw in the person of dear Albert, whom she declared possessed every quality that could make her happy. She then listed them, writing, "He's so sensible, so kind, so good, and so amiable, too. He has, besides, the most pleasing and delightful exterior and appearance you could possibly see." Since that first meeting, there had been no further personal contact between the two young people. On her accession, Albert had sent his cousin merely a correct and formal little note of congratulation. For her later correspondence with her uncle, it is clear that as late as April 1838, Victoria still regarded Albert as her future husband. But a note of impersonality had crept into their relationship. Leopold was busily grooming the young prince to be the husband of the Queen of England, and was consulting Victoria as to the best method of directing his education to fit him for this position. To fit him for this position. I want to look at the pictures. Pictures with him and the daughters, their 5 children. They're all in dresses. And this is Prince Albert. Like I said before, when the Queen is is a regent or has a regency, and marries a person, they become the prince, not the king, so as to not outrank them. So Prince Albert and Queen Victoria. In so doing, Leopold assured his niece that he was most anxious to see Albert grow into a very good and distinguished young man, and that he personally would spare no pains to achieve this goal. After a correspondence, distinctly unemotional on Victoria's side, it was decided that a course of foreign travel, with Stockmar acting as bear leader, would be the best plan. Albert himself did not seem to have been too happy about his future prospects, writing to his much loved tutor, "I am to go into society, learn the ways of the world, and vitiate my culture with fashionable accomplishments." I, I don't know what that vitiate. I want to look that up. Spoil or impair the quality of or efficacy of, danger or impair the legal validity of.
Vitiate. Vitiate.
Adding the slightly bitter comment, the last of which would appear to be an extraordinarily good testimonial in Victoria's eyes. However, he was resigned to go with it, hoping only that his personal integrity might not suffer in the process. At somewhat infrequent intervals, Stockmar made a report to Victoria, for instance, telling her that in Rome, Albert had made such thorough use of his time that he had left no major sight unseen. Then even visited the, the Vatican, and later Albert gave a lively and amusing account of of a papal audience, which shows the prince's mirthful appreciation of the ridiculousness of the ridiculous as he watched a cleric attempting to kiss the papal foot. Neither Leopold nor Victoria seem to have felt any impropriety in so directing Albert's life. By any young man might be forgiven for finding his future wife playing so important a part in molding his education, galling to his pride. It was well indeed that Albert was sensible, good, and kind, They were all virtues which he was to need in the future. I'm getting some Discord pings. When Victoria finally nerved herself to discuss the question of her marriage, her attitude was still one of temporizing. Temporizing. I guess I'll look that up. Sort of like temporal, that kind of thing. Avoiding making a distinction or committing oneself in order to gain time, or temporary. Temporarily adopt a particular course of action in order to conform to the circumstances. She started by asking Melbourne if he knew that King Leopold's great wish was that she should marry her cousin Albert, and that she should had told her uncle she could decide nothing until she had met Albert again. Melbourne's attitude was equally lukewarm. He was so he was inclined to stress the unpopularity of the Kohlbergs, who, he said, were not liked abroad. The Queen, whose latent obstinacy was always aroused by any hint of opposition, then asked Melbourne if there was anyone else equally suitable. When they went through the list of possibles, they decided there was none. Once again, Victoria reiterated that her feelings were against matrimony, either then or later, but that from all she had heard about him, Albert would be just the person. Melbourne was inclined to disagree. He told the Queen that he did not like the idea of her marrying a cousin, and reminded her that foreigners were not popular in England. At the time, he was forced to agree that to marry a subject could lead to all kinds of jealousies and difficulties. Finally, that they agreed that it was not necessary to do anything definite for another 3 or 4 years. Leopold was not content to accept this policy of drift, and by July 1838 was pressing his niece to give her consent to a visit from Ernest and Albert in the autumn. Once again, Victoria declared that she had very little desire to see Albert. It is interesting to speculate about her reasons for this reluctance. And I'm assuming people do speculate. Um, yeah. Her reaction was in many ways a neutral one. It marks the gulf that divided her schoolroom miss. Schoolroom miss, who had only recently passed her 17th birthday, from the 20-year-old young woman who for 2 years had been queening it. That's interesting. In the drawing rooms and ballrooms of London, until her accession. Victoria had been kept on the tightest of maternal reins, and though much had gone awry in the past year, independence was still sweet to her. To marry was to relinquish at least some of it. The position of a wife at this period was one of subordination. She was her husband's chattel. He could he could legally beat her within limits, lock her up, deny her access to her children, all her property, unless tied up in a settlement before marriage, belonged to her husband. Even her earnings after marriage were legally his. Victoria knew, of course, that there was no danger of any of these things happening to her personally, but it was difficult for her to shake off the assumptions and conventions of society which she was a member. Moreover, Victoria was sufficiently intelligent as well as conventionally minded to realize that with marriage, some part of her new and delightful independence must be sacrificed. Much later, in 1858, when writing to her own newly married eldest daughter, she spoke of the yoke of a married woman, though she also by then could write of the unbound happiness if one has a husband one worships. It is a foretaste of heaven. But in 1839, she had not learned to worship Albert and was more concerned with the possibility that it might be a foretaste of hell. Indeed, she confessed that she was so accustomed to having her own way that the odds were 10 to 1 against her agreeing with anybody. Mm, seems like everything's going well. Stream's going well, things like that. Chum is asking when after show VC when, or when after show VC. That's what Chum does. Chum likes to ask when after show VC. Waiting for a response. Let's see what he gives me. The book so far is I like it. I like the way that Dorothy is like I feel like Dorothy is coming from a place of knowledge, of research and things like that, and she's able to synthesize the information and sort of distill everything into a nice story. And that's it. It feels like when I read the book, it feels like I'm reading a story, much less a history book. But I guess those things are kind of one and the same. Um, but I do enjoy it. I do enjoy reading this book. I like it. Um, but yeah, I'm not sure if I'm interested in learning about English culture or things like that as a whole, um, or English history. Um, I'm not sure, but at least for now, I do find it interesting in the way that Dorothy is able to present it. Um, I'm always interested in learning more, things like that. I wouldn't mind necessarily the task of learning about English culture. I think I'm subscribed to a few channels, things like that, um, on YouTube, but I don't necessarily watch them either. I don't go out of my way to watch their catalog like I do with some other channels, some meme channels. Um, but I am going out of my way to read this book, um, which I think is a nice difference. Um, yeah, I wish I could know what it was like to write this book, to know the process of writing a book like this, to sort of be able to talk to Dorothy or get into the mind of a historian. Um, because I think things like that are interesting. Um, yeah, I think that. Um, but it doesn't seem like Chum is giving me a response, so I guess I'll just go on with reading the book. I'm not sure I vibe with this one. I'm not sure if I vibe with a Serial Experiments Lane gif, but I do vibe with me on Discord. I like that. It's a nice vibe. Um, Trying to figure out where I left off. I still have a ways to go with this book. The borrow ends in about uh, 20 plus minutes. Oh, okay. Okay, where I left off in the book. As in addition, Victoria's victory over Peel in the matter of her ladies had staved off the day when she would have to part with her good Lord Melbourne. It is not surprising that she preferred to continue as she was. Marriage was, after all, as Lord Melbourne was quick to point out, a step which involved both her personal happiness and political considerations, and she should not be undertaken lightly. Should not be undertaken lightly. Victoria could not have agreed more! Exclamation point. Three days after her talk with Melbourne on the matter, Victoria wrote a letter to her uncle designed to cover her retreat. She began by asking if Albert himself were aware of the family plan for their marriage, though it is difficult to believe that she was genuinely ignorant on this point. Next, she asked if Albert realized that there was no implied engagement between them. As she pointed out, in a slightly panic-stricken manner, she might like him as a friend, as a cousin, as a brother, but not more than that. In which case, she insisted that she could not be regarded as being in any way guilty of a breach of promise, because she declared emphatically, "I never gave any." What is more, she uttered, refused even to be considered a making a final promise that year. Even if Albert did come, and she did consider the possibility of marriage, she made it clear that this could not take place for another 2 or 3 years at the earliest. Finally, she told her uncle that she had great repugnance to changing her present position, adding that the subject was not an agreeable one. In every way, Victoria was determined to leave her uncle with no illusions. Nevertheless, he persisted, and the visit was arranged for early October. Victoria stalled almost to the end. Writing to Leopold in August, she told him that she did not feel at all well, and was thoroughly exhausted by all she had gone through that season. This was understandable. There had been the bedchamber crisis in May, and Lady Flora had died in July. Even after she had agreed to the visit, Victoria was still at pains to make it clear that she was in no way committing herself. Hmm. On 25th September, she asked her uncle to detain her cousins, not be it noted her dearest cousins, or dear Albert, but merely the cousins, for a few days, because some of her ministers were coming to Windsor on important business, and she feared that if the arrival of the young Colbergs coincided with the presence of her ministers, the public might suppose that an announcement of her engagement was imminent. In any case, she thought that a day or two in Brussels would do those young gentlemen good. Nevertheless, somewhat illogically, Victoria was obviously annoyed when she received a letter from Albert telling her that they could not set out until the 6th. Eventually, they arrived at 7:30 on the evening of the 10th of October. On the previous evening, the Queen confided in Melbourne that she was very tired. Obviously, she was not looking forward to the strain that she feared lay ahead. Albert himself was arriving in no very happy frame of mind. Previously, he had told his tutor that he had heard that Victoria is said to be incredibly stubborn, and her extreme obstinacy to be constantly at war with her good nature. She delights in court ceremonies, etiquette, and trivial formalities. She is said not to take the slightest pleasure in nature and to enjoy sitting up at night and sleeping late into the day. I did sort of browse around in the archive and I found another book called um, uh, Victoria. Hold on, let me see if I can get it. I'm pretty sure it's down here. Here, Victoria: A Life of Contradictions, and this one is way more recent than this one. And I'm sort of wondering where this book sort of fits in the timeline of Victoria, Queen Victoria sort of dialogue, information, research. I would be surprised if this book didn't leave a footnote on the history of Victoria's understanding of the history of understanding Victoria's history. This is sort of a well-written book, and it's pretty lengthy as well, so it discusses a lot. Um, I'm not sure if I want to read that other book to compare the two, but maybe one day I could read that book as well. It is on the archive. It is available to be read. Um, but there would be no. I'd basically just be reading it for the context of literally like the meta context of learning about Victoria, how people see Victoria, which is um, not the point of the books. Right. Hold on. Hmm. But I think that's what I wanted to say. That sort of fits with the title of a book that I saw, not necessarily the book itself. Her extreme obstinacy to be at war with her good nature. um, I guess I can sort of imagine myself in Victoria's shoes, I guess. Um, I had my moments in high school. I still have my moments. Um, but yeah, continuing with the book. These, he wrote, were gloomy prospects by hold on. By the time that he and Ernest were to make their journey to England, he was aware that even these gloomy prospects were uncertain, and that he was to be viewed as a future husband on approval. Albert was never a person to shirk what he thought to be his duty, and his uncle Leopold had constantly emphasized that he must consider his position as Victoria's husband a high responsibility to which he must dedicate himself with unswerving devotion. Nevertheless, he was not prepared to wait endlessly on her shilly-shallying, only to be left looking ridiculous at the end of it. Never heard that. Never heard that phrase, shilly-shallying. I'm gonna see if that. I'm guessing. No, that's actually a phrase. It's an English phrase. Um, um, here I'll pull it up while I check the Discord. Well, I guess I'll get back to the book. Chum is being a this or that way about the time exactly when I mean to say now, when he's trying to get a time. I don't know how to describe now in a time other than now. But I will get back to the book. Um, for anyone that's watching, um, hold on, I have to check my Discord DMs. I guess I mean, since Tom is making me deal with this, I should TMNT, TMT. I have no idea what TMT time zone is. I guess that's the end of the reading. Um, it's been a good reading. I enjoyed it very much. Thank you for anyone who stuck around and came to watch the reading. Um, but that's it. Um, what else to say? I'm going to have to give a timestamp in the description, for when I stop reading the book. Um, but that's about it. All these videos will be in a playlist when I'm done reading this book, and I will have the playlist on the home page of my channel, under the books I have read section. So far, I've read The Hundred Dresses, I've read the Book of Grickle, and I've read The Prince and the Dressmaker. So that's 3 books that I've read on the show so far. But yeah, um, Queen Victoria married her cousin. Uh, I've seen that in YouTube thumbnails, things like that, trying to get you to click on it. I had some curly fries and fried chicken today. I got myself a can of soda. I wish I had more than one can of soda to drink, but that's all I got. Wish I got a bottle of soda, but then again, you know, people always say, you shouldn't be drinking soda. But not that people say that to me, but people say that in general. Um, but soda's it's always nice. It goes with everything except for milk. Um, or yogurt, yeah, anything except for milk. But I guess I'll end the stream with a live Ika reaction. Um, but that was it. I have to go back and give a timestamp, but that's that's the end of the stream. Thanks for watching. Up until the point where I stopped reading the book, and if you continued watching, thanks for listening. But that's it, and I will have to think of a title for the next stream.